Hello and welcome to What's the Story? My name is Janice Hermson and I am your host, and we are glad to have you here. Are you hearing me okay?
Me or them?
No, you. You. Are you hearing me okay? Come
I
on.
am. This is great. Yeah.
Seems like my headset is doing something funny, so I got to fix that. So sorry about the little bit of interruption there, but it's all part of doing a live show, and sometimes the mechanics of it don't always work for me. I try.
That's the fun of it as a live show. Huh?
Yeah, it is. It is. I enjoy doing it live. I've had the opportunity to do recordings, and I'm probably going to be doing in the future some recordings on some of the shows that I'll be doing, but for the most part, I really do like being live and having the interaction and the potential for being able to chat with the folks out there that might be listening. And then later we air on 93.7 FM, which is an America Matters media station, and that's from 7 to 9 p.m. on Tuesday nights. So you can hear us again if you want to, if you miss anything. So if you have to step away,
Is it on from 7 to? I thought it was 5 to 7.
No, 7 to 9.
7 to 9.
Yep,
Okay.
7 to 9 p.m. And so I want to make sure everybody knows, if you have not had an opportunity to sign up, I'm going to hope that you will sign up on our Substack. And I'm going to share a screen with you right now to kind of show you what you can do so that you can be a part of the show. And so here we have our last minute pardons, an executive order by Biden, by the way. That's an executive order on the 20th that he did right before he left office. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the new administration. I'm gonna request that you go ahead and sign up for this, hermson.substack.com. But as long as we're already here and we're talking about, are you prepared if the need for caregiving for a parent or loved one occurs? That was going to be our second hour. And as you can see, it's me and Doug today, Doug Ashby, and I'm your host. And we usually have Ed Knoll here with us, and he tunes in no matter where he is. And right now he's out in Florida, but he couldn't make it today. And one of the reasons that he couldn't...
Well, maybe we should kind of preface that, too. The reason that he's not with us is he's taken his mom, who has been ailing lately, to the doctor today.
Right.
Which we certainly, Godspeed with them and wish them the best. I hope,
she's fine.
She's getting
he
a good
assured
bill
me.
of health.
Yeah, he assured me
good.
that she's doing just fine. But it's those after the crisis is over. Now we have the follow-ups, and we have the let's move on with life, and how do we do that? And then maybe there's some adjustments to make. But if you've never had to do any kind of caregiving for any kind of for any family member, it can be pretty daunting, and it can be not necessarily frightening, although there are times when it is. I did it for almost 11 years, and it's a very time-consuming situation. And you were kind of in that situation, Doug, with your wife for a while, right? Weren't you? With the caregiving type of thing, where she had an event that happened, and then there you are, and suddenly you're at the hospital, and then you're having to do all this follow up, and especially as a retired person, you kind of have a routine. Well, now that goes out the window. That's gone, right?
Yeah.
And if you're working and you have to care for family members, my goodness, that's a whole nother thing. And it's very, very, I want to say it's disruptive, but not in a negative way, because of course it's disruptive, but it's in a way that you want so much to be able to help that person and do everything you can for them. And yet you still have your regular commitments that were taking up your whole life, right? And your every hour of the day.
Doesn't this show you how life is really cyclical?
Yeah. It is. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I
So, yeah, and I know when I was caregiving, the times when there were doctor's appointments, you really had to first of all say, okay, that's what we're going to be doing today. That's what I'm going to be doing today is taking this person to the doctor, doing the follow up, and in my case, when we got home, he was bedridden, so we had to transfer from chair to bed and then do all the surrounding things, get all the things prepped so that he could have what he needed. And so I mean there's a lot to that, so you mentally have to be prepared for that. You mentally have to say, hey, this is what I'm doing. And Ed was saying to me, I'm so sorry I can't make it. I might get home, but then I've got this and that to do once I get there. So the important part of the caregiving piece of that is that you set your mind to, this is what I'm doing today. This is my job. Instead of thinking about, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. No, you're doing exactly what you should be doing, which is helping that person to be well, right?
I have while you're speaking there, I was thinking of a story that with I had certain my dad and my mom died when I was very young, and he had remarried to a lady. I guess that's kind of redundant. Well, not in today's. Yeah. So she became my stepmom. Well, when I started going up and visiting my dad, he was always in bed, and I said, Dad, what's the deal? Why, And he says, well, I'm just comfortable here. Well, what it was is in their den they had two chairs and where they watched TV. Well, he couldn't get out of that chair on his own, so my stepmom would have to pull him out.
Oh, I see.
And she was complaining about how it was hurting her back and her arms, and
Sure. Yeah.
And I said, and so my dad's answer was, I'll just stay in bed. Dad,
But
can't.
that is very typical, because when my husband and my husband has passed, so I'm speaking of him in the past tense because he's no longer with us.
Yeah.
And when he first was put into that situation, he actually went through that period of time where he said, no, don't get me out of bed. It's too much trouble. Just don't even do it. Right. So it was very hard, because you want to honor their wishes, but at the same time, you want them to participate
Sure.
in life and do what they would normally do. But for him, it did get to the point that it was more uncomfortable out of bed than it was in bed. So,
Well, with my dad, what I did, and he was always my dad, right?
Right.
So you get to know him. So I told my wife, I said, you know what? Let's go down and let's buy one of those lift chairs.
Yes.
That,
Right.
lifts
Oh,
it
yeah,
up
I
so
have
they-
one. Yeah, I have one because we had one for John.
And she says, well, should we ask him? And I said, no, because
no.
I know what the answer is going to be. Oh, I don't need. So anyway, we did. We bought it. We took it up to his house. His stepmother, my stepmom, was absolutely livid about that.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. She said, you're trying to redecorate my house and all this. And this went on for, oh my gosh, probably about an hour. Finally, she got so angry. I don't know if it was with Debbie and I or with herself, but anyway, she went in the other way. You just do what you want. Okay. So I said, Deb, come on, help me get that chair in here before the environment changes, which we did. So I set it up for my dad. I showed him how it operated and everything. He says, oh, that's kind of cool. About 2 weeks later, I went back there and I said, well, Dad, how's that chair working? And he says, oh, it's awesome. And I asked my stepmom, Betty, I said, well, what do you think? She says, I'm sure angry with you. And I said, well, basically, why? This
Why?
time she says, you knew it was hurting my arms. Why didn't you get me one of those long ago?
That's great.
I think the good Lord puts everybody on this earth for a purpose. And I honestly mean that, because I try to tell certainly my grandkids and my kids, even somebody that you don't agree with, you're exposed to a different view. So
Right.
so learn from it.
Yep.
You might not agree
Well, and
with
obviously
it,
she did.
but you know what? I got both of them. Oh, they were just tickled. They really were. So
That's great. That's great. Well, it's good that she was able to adapt.
Oh,
That's
she
awesome.
was. Yeah.
That's really awesome. Oh my goodness. So that's, our second hour is going to be some other things instead of talking with Ed. And hopefully he'll be able to make it back next week. He was saying that he thinks that possibly he may be back by the end of the month. So, but he sent me a picture of where he's staying. And I said, oh, that doesn't look, it's beautiful. It's just beautiful. And I said, oh, that doesn't look like someplace that you'd want to leave. And he goes, no, if I could stay here, I probably would.
Really?
Yeah, it's really pretty. Wherever he's staying with his mom is very nice.
You
So,
know, when
beautiful view.
when
and,
we moved from Southern California to Nevada here, when I retired, we left California, and I really think I was going to have, Debbie. She said, "Okay, if that's what you want," but that's just about how she said, "Okay." I couldn't blow her out of Nevada here now.
oh, that's wonderful.
But I've been retired for over 20 years.
Yeah.
That time, California has really changed.
Oh, it has.
It's gotten
It has.
bigger,
Yeah.
more traffic, more hoopla. So
More hoopla. I like it. Lots of hoopla. Let's talk about some hoopla. Let's talk about the last minute pardons and the executive order by former President Biden. And I'm sure when you first read that, you probably thought we were talking about President Trump. But no, it was a last minute pardon that Biden did at, I guess, just minutes before he was no longer president. It was on the 20th. I think it was while President Trump was presenting his speech. That was what my understanding was, or somewhere in that neighborhood. And so he pardoned his family, his whole family. And I don't know how anybody feels about that, but, if they accept the pardons, it means that they're saying they're guilty. And I can also understand, I can take the other side of this and say, well, sometimes you do that if you think you're going to be attacked, right? Like when people do plea bargains.
I
Sometimes.
don't know. I would like to see how the courts will decide on a preemptive.
They did that already, I believe. Yes, I think
Really,
that they
because
already did.
what
yeah.
you're saying is, I am excusing these people for not only what they have done, but what they're gonna do.
No, this goes back. No, this is for what they have done. So it goes back to like 2014 to the present.
And but it doesn't apply to it.
Not to what they're going to do. It would
Okay,
just be
all right.
up
Well,
to that
that's
date.
exactly that's
Yeah.
exactly where I was headed.
Yeah.
It's he is denied that they did anything for so long. Why do they need? Why do
Right.
they need
Well,
to-
and the talking points at least are that in fact, they're afraid that President Trump or his administration will do something,
be vindictive.
be vindictive. Yes.
Well, doesn't this beg the question? He has always had Biden. Speaking of the ex-president, and I don't like doing that.
Former.
Well, he was our president. I'd like to give him respect for being that. So I think I should say President Biden, or ex-President Biden, preface it, just to give him just a little. But his entire adult life, 50 plus years, has been in government. How on earth, on a government salary, did he become a multimillionaire?
It's a great question. It's a great question. I don't know. He'd have to answer that one. So
Maybe,
so-
and what they want Trump to do is do just the reverse.
Right.
He's a multimillionaire, and they want him to go away broke.
yeah, well, he apparently did lose money in the last time he was a president. So, we'll see what happens this time around.
Yeah.
But I want to also talk about the executive order that he signed on January 19th. This may not be something you're very familiar with because I had to look it up, and I had watched President Trump at the end of his term signing a bunch of different orders. And I was thinking, my goodness, what in the world is he doing, and why is he doing all of that? And one of the ones he signed was 13961, which was on December 7th of 2020. So it was a month plus before he was out of office, right? And it's called the Governance and Integration of Federal Mission Resilience. And so it has to do, it's to maintain comprehensive and effective continuity programs that ensure national security and the preservation of government structure under the U.S. Constitution. And it was in alignment with another directive. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because it's quite long. So if you want to look it up, if you're interested for further information, 13961, just type in Executive Order 13961, 2020. I don't even think you need to put 2020 and you'll find it. So he signed that one on December 7th, 2020, right? Now, Biden could have signed that one away, just like Trump did with all the ones in this year. He could have signed it away at any point in time. He waited until January 19th of 2025. I almost said 2025. And he revoked of that particular order sections 1, 3, 4, 5, and 7. So he didn't revoke the complete order, just 1, 3, 4, 5, and 7. So he left. I mean, it's, if nothing else, it's curious. So he left section 2, which is Federal Mission Resilience Strategy. And that just talks about to achieve this policy, that he's actually signing the order, reduce the reliance on reactive relocation of personnel, and enhance a proactive posture. So that's all that is. And then 3, 4, 5, so 6 he left as well. And section 6 is amendments to Executive Order 13618. So it references a whole nother one. So if you have more curiosity about that, if you're familiar with Patel Patriot, who is John Harold, he went into a whole thing on this, and he's saying that it proves, if you know what devolution is, he's saying that it probably proves devolution. So, which is all about continuity of government, and that potentially Trump signed something that put us into this continuity of government situation. So it's a conspiracy theory, possibly conspiracy theory confirmed. Who knows? But I really wanted to point it out to anyone out there who has an interest in this kind of thing, because I think it's curious that on January 19th, he revokes a portion of that executive order, not the whole thing. So that's 13961. Look it up and get educated. And if you have any thoughts on it, I'd love to hear from you. Go to janicehermson.com and contact me and tell me what you're thinking about this, because I just haven't had time to go through the whole thing and reread it. But I think it's very interesting when we, like I say, I watched President Trump signing tons of orders at the end, and I was like, why would he bother? They were emergency orders. And I thought, what in the heck is going on here? And of course, I've not ever really figured that out. But, there's a lot going on in our government. We need to pay more attention to them.
Do you know what's interesting about just what you just said? I'm sure, as you do, you like to read these, whatever they are, that the president or vice president or a congressman puts forward. Well, what you do is you read the first paragraph. First paragraph usually says nothing.
Right.
Second paragraph, they kind of lead into it. Third paragraph, they'll give you little bits and pieces until you look at this and you say, oh my God, I can't wade through this BS to find out something. And all of them are written that way. They just get to where it makes your eyes twirl.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So
maybe I guess it's designed that way.
It seems that way, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah.
So let's do our word of the day, because I think it'll lead well into the rest of our show. I mean, we could talk probably for 5 hours with all that the new administration is working on at this point. But we're not going to do that. But we are going to talk about our word of the day. So let me go back and share my screen one more time. and make sure that you see our picture, because I do like to put up a picture that is the word of the day. So there is our pick. Can you guess what the word of the day is? It dates back to the 1500s. That's how far back it goes.
It's been around a long time.
Yeah, it's been around a long time.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I was not familiar with this word at all.
I don't think I've ever even heard it.
Nope, me neither.
It's also tied to witchcraft.
Oh, I didn't catch that part.
Yeah, it's in
oh,
here
well.
someplace.
All right. So, Doug, share the word.
Well, it means to...
No, tell them what the word is.
Oh, don't?
No, tell them.
Oh, okay. It's widdershins.
Withershins.
Widdershins. W-I-D-D-E-R.
No. The one I gave you was withershins. Withershins. It's the less common variant of the word you're talking about, widdershins. So they're both the same.
Okay.
So fire away.
They mean anti-clockwise. So it's the reverse of what...
Counterclockwise, yeah.
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 It says it's also, here it is right here, known as widdershins or widdershins. The term used in Scotland is considered unlucky and causing disasters. I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
Is also used to refer counterclockwise circular movement used to banish spells,
Oh,
curses, and undesirable situations.
interesting.
This is the first word, and we've been doing this forever, that I have actually come up with a word. We've come up with a word that it says no cinnamon.
Synonyms.
Synonyms.
We need some cinnamon.
Yeah, but it did. Did find one, and it says basically anti-clockwise. So there is one.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
But that's it.
Yeah, counterclockwise. That's it. That's all you got.
Yeah.
So that is our word of the day. Widdershins or withershins, whichever way you would prefer to use it. So we're getting into some witchcraft too, which I was not aware of. But I thought it was kind of an interesting word for the fact that we're going into a new administration. And it seems that President Trump, at least on that first executive order that he signed, I think it was the first one, was pretty much undoing what President Biden had done.
Well,
don't you think?
Are these widdershins then?
I think they might be. Some of them.
I mean, is that what you say?
I don't know.
Is that how you use the word?
I don't know if you would use the word that way or not, but it certainly seemed.
You know, I do know for a fact, though, if you do that, you say it with authority, then people accept it.
All right, let's say it with authority. It is. That's exactly how you use that word. How's that? Am I doing all right? Oh, that's funny. So I want to just grab hold of something here from my Telegram page, because I've got the very first executive order that President Trump signed. And he did that, if you weren't paying too much attention to what was going on out there and didn't watch any of the inauguration, it was very interesting to all the different activities because of the fact that it was cold. So they held it at the Capitol, and there were not very many people there, a couple hundred, I think it was, and then ended up going to another event in one of the halls, and that was more people. And then, they were going so many different places. I just found it really interesting and exhausting.
Well,
if I had to do it, that would be really exhausting.
On the way in this afternoon, I was listening to a talking head, and they said, look at what the president's schedule was for yesterday. He was up early. He did that. He was, sworn in. And then, he went through this and he went through that. And to top it off, once they were through, they weren't through because he had three different celebratory balls to go to.
Right.
He didn't get in bed till midnight, 1, 2 o'clock after.
Yeah, and then in the morning he went to I don't know if it was morning, it was probably more closer to late morning or early afternoon. They had a prayer service that they went to, the whole family. So everybody was out there partying until who knows what time. And then
I don't know this. Is he a drinker?
no. Oh no, that's one of his things. No, he's not a drinker.
That's a good thing.
It is a good
I can't imagine
thing.
him
Yeah.
having a day like that and then being hungover.
I know, that'd be really bad. So the first executive order he signed in front of, he was in the parade. They called it a parade event. And they did have parades, but it was all inside. And so they were, I know, it was very interesting to watch because it was almost like they had, I couldn't really tell from my perspective, but it appeared that they had, like you were in I want to say a gym but not a gym. It was like you were outside. I don't know. I can't quite explain it. At any rate, so he was in the middle of this arena. I guess that's what I would say is an arena. And he they had a table set up there and he signed in front of the whole crowd out there. And the first executive order he signed was revoking 78 of Biden's executive orders.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot. 78 of those puppies. I mean,
well, again, the talking head that I was listening to, he says, yesterday, President Trump spent more time speaking personally with the news media than President Biden did in his whole last year.
It's probably true.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, it is. And so then the second order that he signed is a regulatory freeze to halt new regulations. And this statement is puzzling to me. I want to read this order. Until full control of the government is achieved.
Well, that's certainly arbitrary. Isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes. So again, order number 2 that he signed was implementing a regulatory freeze. So no more regulations until, at least federal, until the full control of the government is achieved. So you'll have to read his executive order, his second executive order, to try and figure out what does that mean. What is full control in the guidelines of that particular executive order?
This is akin to they should pay their fair share. I mean, really, these vague terms.
I know.
Have become just commonplace. But what do they mean?
Right.
So
I don't know, again, if you didn't watch, I hope that we're going to be of benefit to you, because that's why I decided to do this, because I thought, well, there are a lot of people that were either working or they had things that they would rather do than sit there and watch this whole thing. And but the third order that he signed freezes all federal hiring. And this has happened before. I don't remember what administration. Was it Reagan when they did a hiring freeze on the feds? I remember that happening, but I don't know if it was Reagan or I don't know who it was. But that's happened before. So that he's frozen all federal hiring with exceptions for military and other specified categories. So again, you got to read the order to know what those exceptions are. And fortunately, there are exceptions because the military should be an exception to that. That should not be frozen.
Again, what's interesting about this is I don't know if it's an executive order or just something he's doing. He's going to fire at least 1,000 of Biden's hirees. He's going to give them the axe.
And so you don't know if that's an executive order. I think I remember seeing something about that later on.
I don't.
Because he signed a lot.
Well,
they had like 200, I guess, planned to be signed, but I don't think they signed them all yesterday.
If you analyze this, I would imagine that federal employees have some sort of, I'll say union because that conjures up a good, so where you can't fire somebody without cause.
Right.
So this,
Well, even with
but
cost,
you
I
know
think
what? A
it's
lot of
hard.
these things, to me, when you look at them, you say, I don't know how he can do that. It sounds
Well,
good.
I'm going to guess the possibility is that they were appointed. And if they're appointed, potentially that's the reason.
Oh,
I would like to look that up and
That's
see.
probably exactly
Yeah,
what it is.
but that would be
Yeah,
my guess, would be that they were
everything,
appointed
you
and so
know,
they were allowed to, have that happen.
I spent most of the day yesterday with my grandson. He just turned 17. And I thought, this is certainly the best civics lesson
Oh, yes.
you can give anybody, because this is the inception of all of this.
Right.
And it's so different.
Well, and being able to see it from the start is very different than if you just kind of come in the middle, right?
Exactly. This is the start. Yeah.
Yeah. So executive order number 4 is that all federal workers are going to return to full-time in-person work immediately, or you're fired.
I don't know if I understand that.
They're working remotely. They're working from home. And here's what I believe is the reason behind this. From some of my Telegram feeds that I watch, they go through Washington, D.C., and they show you, they go inside these buildings, and these buildings are open, but there's nobody in them. They're protected. They have a security guard or whatever at the door, right? There might be one other person in the building. But we have all these buildings that are supposed to house the employees, and the employees are working at home.
It's working. They just say, oh my gosh, what do we do with those buildings? I thought stupid.
Well, is it working though? Is it
Oh, well,
working? That's the
but,
question. And what kind of production? My sister and I, we work at home occasionally, right? I mean, we're self-employed. We can do whatever we want. We can work from home. We can work. And I have a niece that works for the government, actually, not federal, but works here in town. And she works at home part of the time. I have a daughter who works for a private group. She works at home part of the time. So I know that there are instances where this can work. There are times when it can work. But Lenore and I were talking about this, and we said, how productive are we when we're at home? And for focused work, I think it's awesome. I think that I sometimes need to be there because there's no interruptions, customers not coming in, somebody not, not that you don't want customers, you definitely do, but at the same time, you're not able to focus. So it depends on the type of work that you're doing. But I think that there's so many people that in 2020 went home because of the pandemic and were required to work from home, and it made sure that things kept going. But now they don't need to be at home.
Well, it does beg the question, how do you monitor that? How do you monitor that?
That's right.
I have a quick little story that fits.
Well, there are ways, because there's software where you can at least see what a person's doing on their computer.
Yeah.
And they've had that software since the 80s, trust me.
This fits in perfectly. When I was a new battalion chief in Los Angeles County Fire Department, one of the things that was predicated for your pay raises is that you had to take, and they left it up to you, a different, any type of class that would prepare you, make you a better person, to be in the workplace. So I looked, and a lot of these community colleges have a half a unit where you go, and for 3 hours you sit and you listen to an instructor and this and that, and you get your certificate, and I get my pay raise. Perfect. So I'm sitting there, and this auditorium, there's probably at least 100 people in there, and it was all mixed, men and women, and this and that, and they were talking about the workplace. Well, this instructor, I'm listening to him, laughed, I'm half listening to him, and one of the things that comes up is when at your job, should you do just a little bit extra, to be a little motivator? And the instructor said, oh, heavens, no. And then he looks at the crowd and he says, why is that? And then someone popped up, because then they'll expect it of you.
Oh, my goodness.
This is what community college preaching
Oh, my
this.
goodness.
So anyway, but does this not fit in what you're talking about? If you can't monitor people,
Right.
and I'm just guessing here that the level of work people get used to being at home. Instead of getting up and sitting at their desk at 8 o'clock and start doing
Right,
work,
right.
it probably morphed into 9, morphed into 10. And of course, they had to pick the kids up from school and they had to go
Right.
grocery shopping. And that's okay. We'll get it all in. So I would imagine that their workload started getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
Don't know that for a fact. I
Right.
just know human nature.
Either that or the workload didn't require full-time work, and so they could fit it in the 4 hours that they were able to fit
And
in, or
they
5
stretched
hours.
it,
And
yeah.
they at work they stretched it. At home they cut it and they made it, minute, because they had all these other obligations. I mean, you can look at it a lot of ways. What I think though is that either you put the personnel back in the building or you get rid of the building. And in this
That's-
case,
yeah.
they opted to put the people back in the building.
I think that's a
So,
good choice.
I mean, I'm sure you can look at it many ways, but
And I know I know this for an absolute fact. Bear with me, folks. There's going to be somebody out there that says, "Oh, sure. Now look at the pollutants because they're driving, and look at the burden it's
there
going
were
to put
people
on
that
mass
said it was too
transit."
stressful to go to work. There were actually people that were posting that it was too stressful for them to go to work.
Well, then quit.
I would agree with that. So here's number 5.
Well, wait a second. Let's
We've
back
got a
up on
lot
that.
to cover here.
Well,
Come
I
on.
just know I have to say this because I go with my granddaughter. She seems to think that when you go to work, it's all roses. It's not. You're there to do a job. Hopefully 90% of that job is going to be just wonderful. It's something you're interested in. That other 20% is going to be stuff that you just don't want to do, but you're hired to do it.
And not only that, I'm going to say as an entrepreneur, 90% of the time I love what I do, but
Sure.
there are those times when I would rather be doing something else and wonder why I'm an entrepreneur.
Well, let me
And I still have to do the work.
one of the things that we're just talking about is the difference between emergency responders, most notably firefighters versus police. You talk to I don't care who the firefighter is, where he is, what country he's in, what coast he's on, they will say, "I love my job." I absolutely ask a policeman the same.
No, but that's tough.
Yes, it is.
Bet it's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they're doing it for a reason, right?
What, police?
Yeah. And they wouldn't keep going if they didn't have a reason for being.
Well, but that's why most of them, they're the soon as they can take a retirement, usually most systems are 20 years, they put their 20 years in and they're looking for the door.
Right. And you can't really blame them.
Oh, no,
You
heavens
really
no.
can't.
And wait a second, let's analyze that. And if they do love it, we better look kind of fondest at them too.
Well, they're a different personality, right? That's what I would say.
They absolutely are.
Yeah. All right. Here's Executive Order number 5. Donald Trump directs every federal department and agency to address the ongoing cost of living crisis. So this one is one I think you have to read too, because it's food, gas, energy, everything. Get ready to have more cash in your pocket is what this person is saying on this feed. I don't know. I think it's laudable. I do, but I wonder how that's going to be applied. How do they put that all together, right? And how do you, again, that accountability thing, right? This is great, and I'm not condemning any of it. I think it's great that we're having, I can go a lot of places with that. Anyway, if you're going to do it, then how do you follow up? And hopefully there will be follow up on that. All right, Executive Order number 6, he withdraws from the Paris Climate Agreement. So I know that he had done that before. I don't think it's a big surprise. It had, when he was in office last time, he withdrew. Biden comes in, he goes back in, and now we're out again. So these guys, we're like yo-yos.
Well, isn't it? And
Right.
Two of the biggest polluters don't belong to it. One of them is Russia, I believe, and the other is India. I mean, they don't belong, and yet they're polluters.
Yeah. So Executive Order number 7 is just kind of a follow-up to that. Comes with a signed letter to the United Nations to formally announce the U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement. So 6 and 7 are kind of akin to each other. Executive Order numbers 8 and 9, Trump restores freedom of speech. This one puzzled me. I have to be honest with you. I'm happy, right? I believe in freedom of speech as well. How does he have to restore freedom of speech and prevents government censorship of free speech? That's against our Constitution.
Yes.
Why should he have to sign an executive order for that?
Absolutely.
So I think that one's kind of an ironic one, that we have to actually put that one into an executive order. But we know, based on testimony, that the government has been issuing orders to the different social media places to cut people out and stop, allowing this and that to happen. And so maybe it is a necessary evil.
Well, I think that probably is the tip of the iceberg right there, because there are several platforms that are on the internet that aren't regulated. They can say what they want, and or turn a cold shoulder to whoever they want. Maybe it's designed for that.
Perhaps, yeah. Okay, number 9, he ends the weaponization of government against political adversaries of the previous administration. So this begs the question of President Biden's pardon. Maybe those folks don't have to accept the pardons if we sign this executive order that says they're not going to weaponize the government against adversaries of the administration. What do you think?
Well, right along those lines, and when he pardoned everybody on death row, one of them, and there were 2 people that stepped forward and said, I don't want the pardon.
Right.
And if you read about it, it says, wait a minute, I think I was unjustly convicted. So if I accept this pardon, I'm accepting that I was
that I was guilty. Yeah.
So, boy, that falls under the category of chasing your tail, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does. And there are so many more executive orders that he signed, but I want to talk about the one where he pardoned the J6 offenders. And 1,500 of them. Now, last night, as I was kind of, scrolling through social media, there were different people that were saying that they were not letting the prisoners out, even though he had signed the order. This morning, I'm seeing a lot of people saying that they have all been let out. I don't know what the truth is. I have no idea what the truth is.
Are you through with the ones that?
Oh no, there's so many more.
Okay, can I?
My.
I would like to mention one. I don't know where it is, but I would have thought it would have been right up at the beginning, and I printed it out. It says Trump signed an order to end birthright citizenship.
Yes, that is one of the ones I had on the list. But yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay.
Well, what's interesting about that is it said, well, the title, it goes on, what is it and what does it mean? It's guaranteed in the 14th Amendment. Well, it is, but it isn't.
Right.
So I started reading.
This is
one of those that, remember about 10 minutes ago I was saying that it'll make your eyes float?
Yep.
Well, this is one of them. You read the 14th Amendment, and what he did is he's not violating the amendment, because the amendment was specifically drawn up to give citizenship after the Civil War to blacks. So there was a definite need for it. So what they did, well, his order that he signed was a woman here illegally and a man here illegally, if they have a child, the child does not automatically get citizenship. And I pretty much agree with that.
Right. We'll have to see how that one shakes out, because...
this is again, going back to what I was talking about, civics lesson.
Right.
That's why we have the 3 branches of government. Doesn't it work well?
Here is the tough one, the January 6th pardons. So Trump pardoned the vast majority of January 6th defendants charged with participating in the Capitol, and commuted the sentences of 14 others. Among those were leaders of the extremist groups, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. These are the hostages, approximately 1,500 for a pardon, full pardon, Trump said from the Oval Office at his first night as president. So I was watching when he signed this one, and one of the reporters said, why would you do that? I'm paraphrasing. And he said, there are murderers that have done less time than these people have, and they need to be let out of there. So, I don't know how you feel about it, but I do want to read, if I can find the second page to this. I don't know how I lost it. There's a letter from Look Ahead America, who is praising the president for what he did. And the reason I want to read this letter is because it tells you things that you may not know about what was going on. And I'm going to have trouble finding this, I can just tell. Here we go. Okay. So I want to read this letter. Look Ahead America praises President Trump for broad J6 pardons and commutations, calls for accountability, restitution, and national memorial and day of remembrance. So if you're on the other side of this, I understand, but I think that you need to hear this guy's side of it because it's his perspective. By broadly pardoning, commuting, and dropping charges against those politically persecuted for their involvement in the January 6th First Amendment exercise, President Trump has ensured that our long national nightmare is over, and for none more so than the victims and their families. From firing grenades into a peaceful and lawfully assembled crowd to violent early morning raids at the homes of unarmed civilians while aiming assault weapons at their families, to lying to corrupt D.C. judges and semi-literate anti-American D.C. juries, to physical and mental abuse in the gulags, to the deprivation of the ability to earn a living and making families financially destitute, to the cold-blooded murder of Ashley Babbitt, the Biden regime, the FBI, the Department of Justice, the Capitol Police, and the mainstream media have committed a grave crime against patriotic Americans and caused great harm to our nation. So then he goes on to thank the president and suggests what he feels is needed. And the reason I wanted to read that part is because I don't think that everybody realizes that those grenades were thrown at these people. If you've seen more recent videos, the old videos that they put out didn't show this. They were throwing grenades. These people were doing absolutely nothing, and they were throwing grenades into the crowd. So, if you say what you will, if you look at, there's some good posts out there where they have identified the people, they've named the people that were sentenced, what their crime was, and how much they had to pay and how much time they had to do. So many of what I read a long list of this stuff, and most of them they were in a place they weren't supposed to be. And that wasn't in the Capitol. They were on the grounds. There were people there were signs that had gone down that said they weren't supposed to be there, right? Like the fences were torn down or whatever. So you got to remember, a lot of these people came up afterwards, after this had all started, and all they're seeing is the cops waving them in, or that they were standing around on this grassy area and they didn't know it was, quote, restricted. So, okay, so if you want to be technical, yep, they did something wrong. But really, they're going to go to jail for this. It's a real crime. I mean, there's got to be some balance is what I'm going to.
It's funny you should use the word balance. Isn't that what the judicial system is for?
It is. Unfortunately, in Washington, D.C., it seems
political.
That it's very political.
And that's not right.
Yeah.
It's absolutely
It's not.
Right.
And so I understand that, again, if you're on the other side of this issue, you're not going to be happy with this letter at all, and you're going to disagree with it 100%. And I do get that. I've stayed away from the whole issue because I just, other than, we interviewed Jeremy Brown, and to tell you the truth, Jeremy Brown apparently didn't get a pardon, and he's sitting in jail, and I don't know if he ever got a hearing for that. So, he's from Florida, and he's somebody that we managed to be able to interview, and it's a crazy thing. Why I couldn't believe it when that first happened. And why would we keep all these people in jail that yeah, maybe they were in the wrong place, wrong time, but if they didn't do anything bad, why
Yeah.
are they there? I
Yeah.
mean, they should be reprimanded. Okay, fine them, do those things. But I mean, this has gotten out of hand. That's just my personal feeling. So
Well, I think once the judicial system enters into the realm of politics, it minimizes the judicial system. And again, going back to my statement about the three branches of government, I think that's exactly why the Supreme Court is there. But doesn't it make you wonder whenever there's a decision? All of this is based on law. The Supreme Court has people come in and they tell them, bid whatever it is.
sure.
And yet the liberals decide one way and the conservatives decide another way. Wait a minute, I thought
that
this was
seems
written
wrong
law.
too. Yeah, there's a law. What are we doing with the law? Forget who's liberal and who's whatever.
Yeah, how can it be
Yeah, it doesn't make
decided
sense. It doesn't
by
make sense.
politics?
And we are running up on our clock here. So, for anybody who's watching, we thank you very much for being here. If you have questions, you can comment. You can always text me at 775-399-2888. I keep that on and right in front of me. And we are going to be back for our second hour. We're going to cover some more of these. I've also got some publishing information that I wanted to share. There's a publisher out there that wants to do like 8,000 books in a year. Whew, that's just crazy. And I don't know how they're going to do that. So, well, actually, I do, and I'll share that with you. Anyway, but we will be back. You will still see us, or at least see the room. We're going to go take a little walk, and then we'll be back in just a few minutes. So don't go away, and thank you so much for listening. Welcome back, everybody. This is What's the Story? I'm Janice Hermson. I'm your host, and this is our second hour. I'm here with Doug Ashby, my co-host, and we are missing Mr. Ed Knoll, who is busy being a caregiver today, and we applaud him for that. So we miss you, Ed, if you're listening, and hope Mom's still doing A-OK out there, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. All right. And we've been talking about the different executive orders that President Biden signed. In the first hour, if you missed it, we did talk about the last minute pardon and the executive order that Biden signed. You might want to listen to that. It's quite interesting that he revoked partially one of the executive orders that President Trump did in his first term in 2020. So a little complicated, but I guess none of this is real straight up, right? So this hour, we are going to talk some more about some of the executive orders, but Doug has you can't make this stuff up, and I've got a thing about publishing. There's no shortcut to publishing a book. Also, and I'm going to, also the beneficial ownership information, I want to cover some of that. So be a little bit, here and there, but we want to cover as much as we can. And those executive orders could take up the whole show. So we want to keep it a little bit variety for you.
Yeah,
We'll try and do that.
Fortunately or unfortunately, you can't make this stuff up. Usually falls in the funny category.
Oh, this isn't funny, huh?
But it's really not funny. And the first one I'm going to give you, I had this for last week's show because we talked a lot about the fires that are going on in Southern California. And unfortunately, today they're starting to break out in San Diego County.
Oh, you're kidding. I hadn't heard that.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
well,
no.
they've had 100 mile per hour winds. And as you've heard me say many, many more times on this program, as long as the wind's blowing, you're not going to put the fire out.
Right.
You can perhaps save structures, but even that's difficult. But that's the genesis of what happened in Malibu and Altadena, and there is that the winds were just so terrific that you could, and as an incident commander, and I've been in this position before as an incident commander, where I felt that my number one job was to keep my firefighters safe. Because in one of the things, it's interesting, and I want everybody to take a look at this. Look at the brush around us, all of this. And you look, last year it burnt, and this year it's going to be back. Mm-hmm. So you're going to give your life or a grave injury for something it's cyclical. It's going to be there. It's part of nature. So, but anyway, getting back to this, Representative Sidney Camlogger Dove, a Democrat from California, suggested to CNN on Tuesday that the decision was made to sacrifice the Altadena neighborhood in Los Angeles before wildfires ravaged the area.
That's the terminology they used, was sacrifice it?
Yeah, it's in other words, if and I'm sure most of the listeners don't know this, but there's a very, very high percentage of black homes in Altadena, and the whole community was pretty much wiped out. And so what she was saying is that the county fire department says, "Nah, it's not worth saving." You
believe that?
Oh, heavens no. Heavens no.
No, that's what they were thinking.
Well, no.
I just don't understand the mentality of it, right? Am I missing the point?
Yes, every group that we talk about has a wingnut in it.
That's horrible.
And here was the second one about you can't make this stuff
So
up.
she literally said that they had to sacrifice it.
No, they were going to
They were going to
sacrifice it. This is
sacrifice
pre.
Oh, this is pre.
Well, let me read this again. Yeah. That a decision was made to sacrifice the Altadena neighborhood.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? Well,
It is.
if you look at the logistics of that, how on earth is that going to happen?
I don't know.
That's
I
why I
don't
say
know.
you can't make this stuff up. The second one is, and I think this was on the, and again, I had this last week and this week. I looked to see this week if there was anything more on the story. And it's basic. Southwest Airlines pilot arrested just before takeoff and accused of a DUI.
Oh my.
A Southwest Airlines pilot was arrested Wednesday at the Georgia airport just before takeoff and accused of driving under the influence, according to the airline officials and authorities in Georgia. On Wednesday, he saw passengers told CNN affiliate on Wednesday they saw police escort the pilot off the plane. David Alsop, 52, of Bedford, New Hampshire, faces a DUI charge following his arrest at the International Airport, according to records from the Chatham County Sheriff's Office in Georgia.
Wow.
This isn't the first time this has happened. I don't mean with him. Every now and then you'll see this. And I don't know. Let me see if I can find this. Here it is right here. Federal regulations prohibit pilots from consuming alcohol within 8 hours of flying or attempted to fly an aircraft, according
Well, yeah, that's
to
like
the
truckers.
FAA.
My
Pardon?
husband was a trucker. Yeah, it's like truckers.
Yeah. So the same rule applies if a pilot has a blood alcohol concentration of 0.04 or greater.
Wow.
A bail was set at $3,500. This reminds me, I don't know, there was another news story, again, about airline pilots, and it's kind of funny, but it's not. This is, I believe, at Burbank Airport, where a pilot is flying in and he wants to keep his time schedules, right? And so he's setting down, he's flying too fast. He sets down about halfway through the airport and he skids off the end of the airport into a service station at the end of the airport. That's not where it gets funny. He takes, and this is when they would play the recordings.
Right.
He takes off his headsets and puts them down, and he says, well, there goes a perfectly good career.
Wow.
Same thing with this DUI. There goes a perfectly good career. Can you imagine that?
Since we've been talking about executive orders, you brought up the fire. I got something popped up on my screen, so I pulled it up. This is the Western Journal. And they somebody posted on Twitter, among President Trump's initial memos is this one: putting people over fish, stopping radical environmentalism to provide water to Southern California. So this particular executive order, according to these guys, it says Trump recounted in his January 28th order titled, and I just told you what the title was, during my first term, the state of California, at the direction of its governor, filed a lawsuit to stop my administration from implementing improvements to California's water infrastructure. My administration's plan would have allowed enormous amounts of water to flow from the snowmelt and rainwater in rivers in Northern California to beneficial use in the Central Valley in Southern California. This catastrophic halt was allegedly in protection of the Delta smelt and other species of fish.
Oh.
Today, this enormous water supply flows wastefully into the Pacific Ocean. Politico reported Newsom filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration in 2020. So he's changing this with this particular thing. Now, my question to you, because you said, water wouldn't have helped, or water wasn't the solution or the criteria, but it still would have helped. Yes? I mean, it would have made a difference in maybe the volume or the spread or something. It had to make a difference.
We're kind of mixing subjects here.
You're
not gonna put the fire out with water.
I get that.
All right.
No, you've said that plenty of times.
But what you are gonna do, and it's what, again, as an incident commander would do, is he's going to put his fire engines into communities to protect homes.
Right.
You're
And
not
that
there. You're
was my
not there to
point.
put the fire out. You're
Right.
there to protect the home.
That was
so
my point.
yes,
Yes,
if
it
you're
would have
going to
made a
protect a
difference.
home, what do you have to have?
Water. So that's being taken care of now. And I thought since we were talking about the fire, this would be an appropriate thing to bring up. So there you
Well,
go.
see, here's something else that's not mentioned with the smelt, and maybe I'm mixing subjects. I don't think so. But there is a battle of nature with the rain-off water and the rivers going to the ocean. They have to continue that, because if it doesn't, the seawater flows back up in those rivers and will destroy some of the land for farming.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's a balance. So they have
Always
to
a
keep the
balance.
water going out there
Yeah.
too. So
Always a
it's only half the story.
Right, right. And that's generally what we run into no matter what, right? It's
Yeah.
you only
Now
ha-
you ask the question: is that a lie? It's a lie by omission, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and that's what they were saying. The fire hydrants, there was no water. So, they couldn't do their job.
Here's something too that people don't know or don't understand. For every half a pound of water, a pound of water weighs 8 pounds, and for every foot.
Wait a minute. You just said a pound of water weighs 8
All right,
pounds. I
wait a
have to
second,
call you
wait
on
a-
that one.
Wait a second. Take two.
Rewind.
Yeah, take two.
That's right.
There is for every pound of water rise, there's a half a pound of pressure.
Okay.
A lot of the water tanks in Malibu are up at the top naturally, and the water flows down in pipes. Well, when you get to a fire hydrant on Pacific Coast Highway, what does that mean? That means when you open up that valve on that hydrant, you're going to have 500 pounds of pressure. This is something else that's not mentioned. Our hose is all tested at 300 pounds.
Oh, we're in trouble now. Wow.
So, there could be a reason why, they weren't getting,
There's so many factors.
it's
Yeah.
just a complicated,
Yeah.
and we as human beings, I think, especially since the advent of the TV, we want one-liners for the way we think about stuff. We don't want to have to think that it's multifaceted. All of this in Malibu, Altadena, Pasadena, all the fires, and I'm sure. Oh, and here's something with San Diego. Didn't mean to
That's okay. Go ahead.
switch
that's all right.
midstream here. I honestly think there's a goofball out there setting fires.
Yeah. Well, and there have been reports that people have found people doing that. So,
Yeah.
and it sounds like there's more than one. And,
Absolutely.
you
And the winds, the hot weather,
Right. All
and
that
fires bring
combination,
those
yeah.
goofballs out. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a shame. And, I guess it's back to that see something, say something, right? Because it's important to.
But you know what? I have a problem with that too.
Okay, tell me why.
Well, we're supposed to say, oh, I saw something. I'm going to report my neighbor. Oh,
Yeah, no,
shut
no,
up.
no. I know. I agree with that too.
Yeah.
I see your point. I get it.
Just like
But if
my-
somebody's
wait
lighting a
second.
fire and it's my neighbor, I'm
son-
gonna rat on him.
My
Sorry.
son- my oldest boy has an expression, and I've adapted it many, many times so I can use it. He says, "My hypocrisy knows absolutely no bounds."
There you go. I like it. Oh, so let's switch gears just for a second. We'll get back to some more executive orders, and we still have to talk about the pardon me, that there's no shortcut to publishing. Just got a little tickle there. So, but let's talk about the beneficial ownership information.
Uh-oh. We might
Yeah,
be
I know.
losing her.
Might be losing me. What can I tell you? Yeah, that's kind of warm. You get a little tickle there.
Yeah, we used to have cough buttons. They worked real well. Sorry, folks.
Yeah, I know.
That's
I
just-
apologize for that. But the beneficial ownership information is important to entrepreneurs that are limited liability companies, some corporations. You're going to have to look and see if you fall into the category that would be required to file. There was a new law that went into effect, just to kind of recap a little bit. And that new law required companies like ours to file with this new group, and I think it was IRS type stuff. At any rate, somebody filed a lawsuit and said this is unconstitutional. Okay, so there was a big kibosh on it, put a hold, and then somebody came up and some court overruled it and said nope, that's constitutional. So now you're filing again. And the deadline for that was you had to file before January 1st of 2025. Well, by the way, I have not filed, and I'm not in violation at this point, because then another court put a stop on it. So at that point, then somewhere along the line, then they said, oh, no, you're going to have to file by January 13th or 14th or something like that of 2025, because, we're not feeling that this is unconstitutional. The whole thing is as a company, I file all my paperwork. I'm with the state. They know who owns our company. We're all listed there, So you feel like this is just another intrusion. And it wouldn't even be all that bad, except that if you don't file by the particular date, there's a huge fine for that per day. I don't know, it's $591 per day and up to $10,000 in criminal penalties plus potential prison time. Yeah, really? So a lot of people have already filed. Whether it's constitutional or not, they don't want to face this kind of thing, right? So I'm a holdout.
That's the government pummeling you into compliance.
Yeah, exactly. It's comply or die in this case. Yeah.
They should have to prove it's constitutional before they adapt it.
So at this point, we're still on hold. They're still, they're still holding out. The 13th, 14th deadline went by. I'm going to check before the end of the month. Make sure that we still don't have to file, because nobody is notifying you. I was not notified about this. This is something that you just kind of had to find out about. Either listen to the news or whatever. I didn't get a notice in the mail that said to me, hey, you got to file this or you'll be, in violation. I was fortunate. One of our clients had a bookkeeper that came in and said, hey, have you filed your beneficial ownership information form? I was like, huh? What are you talking about? And I then told another one of our clients who had not known about it either. And so we're all sitting here saying, my goodness, isn't this interesting? Is this a money generator for them or, what the heck? So anyway, right now we're still on hold, and I will keep following up and let everybody know in case you are one of the people like us that might have to file. And there's no fee for filing. And so you might say, well, Jan, what the heck's wrong with you? Why wouldn't you want to file? Well, I feel it's an intrusion. I feel that I'm complying with, they're looking for people who are laundering money. That's really what they're looking for, right? But I don't know. I just feel it's an intrusion. So that's my reason behind it. And so I'm not filing until I absolutely have to. That's where I'm at.
We talked, see if I can find it, about how they
Tell me how you feel.
What they wanted to do is, LA mayor issues executive order to expedite rebuilding. And one of the things she says, I wanted to have, be organized around urgency, common sense, and compassion. Does that mean the laws that they have aren't?
I know.
That's exactly what you're talking about.
It is. Yeah.
If you can prove that, well, then how's
we'll
it going to be against,
Right. But, this is like if you file late, but you don't owe as an LLC, if you file your tax return late, but you don't owe any money, because when you're an LLC, that money flows to the partner, right? depending on whether or not you do it as a corporation or as a partnership. We do it as a partnership, so it flows to us. So we have to file taxes if we make money. If we don't make money, then you just file, right? But if you don't make money, you still file, but as the partnership. Regardless, the partnership itself does not owe money. The LLC does not owe money. So when you file that return, it's strictly an informational return. But guess what? If you file late, you get a penalty. Now, how does that make sense? And I'm sure there's an accountant out there that can explain this to me. But I'm going to tell you, it's all just money grab. That's all that is.
Years ago, I built a spec home.
And it ain't cheap, by the way.
I built a spec home, and I made quite a bit of money on it, and I sold it. And just before it was to close, filled out all the paperwork, and the escrow officer called me and said, "No, you didn't answer one of the questions here." I said, "Well, what was that?" She says, it's pretty much the last question. It says the federal government wants to know what you're going to do with this money you made.
Oh.
And I said, "Yeah, I read that." He says, "Well," and I said, I'm not telling
none of their
them.
business?
It's exactly right. Well,
Yeah.
you have to. And I said, "I do." Well, let me put it very, very clear to you. I will not fill that out. You can back up the escrow, close it, do what you want. It is not being filled out. She says, "Okay."
I'll bet she filled it out.
I'll bet she did too.
Yeah, I'll bet she filled it in.
But you want to talk about an intrusion of government.
Yeah.
How is
When
it?
I worked the census, they told us that if you couldn't get them to answer questions about their race or, some of those other things that, were fairly visible, right? That, male, female, that type of stuff, right? That you're supposed to fill it out for them. Yeah, it was terrible.
That
It was
is.
terrible. You shouldn't
That's-
do that. You shouldn't do that.
That's,
if that person does not want to respond, they have the right to not respond.
Yeah.
And then if there's consequences, and we would tell them if there were consequences, then they're willing to suffer those consequences. That's on them, not on
Well,
you. And as long as you've advised them of
one of the
consequence.
things you can say is that, okay, we'll take this to court. Well, I like that expression.
Oh, yeah.
It's expensive.
Very expensive.
You
Yeah.
know, if a good attorney now costs $1,000 an hour.
Yeah.
So how is that going to be a win-win for you?
It never is. All right. So that's my beneficial ownership information. If you
Let me-
are an entrepreneur, be sure to pay
Let me-
attention. I'll try and keep you
Let
informed.
me go back to the fire just a second. Okay. This I plucked off the internet, and Janice and I've talked about this before, the difference basically between a conservative and a liberal. Whoopi Goldberg says California should deny paying federal money in the future if wildland relief has strings. Well, now that's a pretty good, feel-good statement. I want this to go right to the people, no strings. Conservative view. House Republicans and Trump discussed tying California wildland aid to debt ceiling.
Oh,
In other words,
strings.
conservatives believe
Strings.
conservatives believe if we don't have the money, we can't give you any. Whoopi Goldberg believes, I don't care if you have it or not, give it to me.
Yeah.
So
That's
now
interesting.
who's right here?
I don't think there's an answer to that.
I don't either.
There's no answer to that. All right, so let's go back to a couple of these executive orders. We're still going to talk about some publishing. We've got our book blitz still, but I thought I'd cover a couple more of the executive orders that President Trump signed yesterday. TikTok. On the social media front, he signed an executive order extending the deadline for TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, to divest from the app just one day after a law requiring its ban took effect. And I don't know if you're aware, but he had actually announced before he became president, he told them that he was not going to, his administration was not going to come after them if they started up again. And so they did. went offline for a few hours on Sunday, but became available again after the company announced it believed Trump would block the ban from taking effect, and his executive order gave ByteDance an additional 90 days to divest from TikTok. And now he's talking about, from what I heard him saying, he's talking about having the United States own half of that company, because if they put him out of business, they're worth nothing. If he approves an extension, they're worth probably trillions. So he's saying, well, maybe since it's on our word, maybe we should own part of it. And whether that's in the form of a private company or the government itself, I don't know. And I don't think he knows at this point. It's all in flux. And I think it's interesting because I know people, they were talking about all these young people that are on TikTok. I know a lot of old people on TikTok. They love it. They just think it's great. I personally am not on, but I know people who are.
If it wasn't there, would you miss them?
I wouldn't.
I don't.
But that's me. But there are, again, he's talking about the young people, though I have friends and people that are very much involved in TikTok. And there is a thing called Book Talk, which I have tried to get on a couple of times, and something always got in my way. So I would have been on, but didn't ever get there. So what can I tell you? All right, climate and drilling. President signed a number of executive orders withdrawing the United States from key agreements and agencies. Obviously, the Paris Climate Accord, also the World Health Organization got out of that. And he did another order declaring a national energy emergency, which could allow him to unilaterally bypass certain environmental regulations. So how many of these are going to be challenged is really the question.
All
I
of them?
guess. Yeah, probably. I'm guessing. There probably already have been, and I haven't seen the news yet. But immigration, the one that you talked about, where he signed the executive order seeking to end birthright citizenship, I'm sure that's going to be challenged.
Yeah, it already has been.
Okay.
Yeah,
Also
they've already
signed,
filed a lawsuit against
well,
it.
that's to be expected.
Yes.
Yeah. Signed an
Wait
order.
a second. Can we talk about that? Do you
Hold
think
on
we
one
should
second.
have
Let me
that?
just designating Mexican drug cartels and some other organizations to be foreign terrorist organizations. I think that's really important.
I do
think
too.
that makes a difference in how the agencies, police, and the border patrol, and all of them can handle themselves around these particular groups.
Do you know what I think the nexus of that is? They get money now.
Oh, yeah.
Follow the money. Yeah.
It's true. It's always about the money. And he reinstated, and then we can talk about what you want to talk about. Also reinstated the Remain in Mexico policy, which required asylum seekers to stay in Mexico while their cases go through courts. I think that's fair to everybody, truthfully. I don't know about Mexico, but I think it's fair to the people because they're in limbo if they come in. And I know a lot of them just want to be here, but if they aren't going to get in, have them know that so that they can, if it's genuine, right? I get it. I know I'm being a little Pollyanna about this, but if they genuinely are here for asylum, then let's get that done properly so that then when they come in, they can actually have a life. I mean, isn't that what this is all about? That's at least on paper. That's what it's all about.
Well, I think the word asylum. I want to see. That's kind of the catch-all phrase to get help. And
he shut off the app right when he became president. The app that Biden had implemented so that people could sign up and get their asylum stuff going, that went down. Went down. As soon as he was president.
What happened, and I don't know the answer to this, I'll just kind of throw it out there, about President Biden selling parts of the wall that have already been
I
constructed.
heard that got stopped. I heard that they stopped him from selling it. And because that's ridiculous. That's just ridiculous. That's totally against our own country if you're doing that.
But that to me smacks of we're not getting the whole truth. Maybe an area that he's selling it is where the fence wasn't high enough. Or maybe it was that it was a faulty fence. Or, I mean, there's just a lot of things. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt.
Good
but
for
I'm
you.
saying, yeah. that maybe
I'm not going to give that same
well,
benefit.
it's so outrageous. There has to be more to it.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I will used to agree with you, Doug. I used to be that person. I'm not that person anymore because there's just too many outrageous things that we've lived through in the last 4 years where it looks like our government is trying to kill us. It looks like our government is trying to do everything to make it hard on us. I mean, that's the way it appears. And there comes a point where you have to stop giving allowance and say, no, that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing.
Well, today, again, I was listening to a talking head on the radio, and the question from the narrator to a Democratic national congressman was, with all these regulations and everything that are happening from Trump, don't you think if the Democratic Party was serious in the beginning of the President Biden's administration and took immigration as an issue and handled it better, don't you think that it would have weakened President Trump's status
absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, do you know what her response was? She says, we've always cared about migration, illegal migration. Well, she didn't say illegal, but she says people coming into this country. We've always cared about that. Well, why didn't you listen to the people and stop it? How can you make a statement that you agree and yet it goes contrary to what popular beliefs were?
Yeah, and during the signing, the press asked President Trump if, I think the question was framed somewhat like, well, you just don't like immigrants or something. And he said, no, I want immigrants. I just want them to be legal. He says, we need them.
That's
We're going
true.
to need them.
I think everybody thinks that.
I agree.
But how about this? At that point we can make the selection, and we can get people coming in that actually help this country.
It's true. And
why would you import people that are going to be needy and need government assistance?
It's true. When April Kempler did her book, The Altered Eye, her father-in-law, who was the story of that book, and she was telling his story, he talked about how long it took him to get here because, he was a Holocaust survivor and all the things he had to go through in order to qualify to come into the country. And, all the different people that were waiting. So it's not a new thing. It's not that we don't like immigrants. There were health issues. There were issues of are you going to be able to work? Right? Do you have a job, or can you get a job?
Sponsor?
Exactly.
You won't be a burden on the government.
Yeah. Floyd Sneed, when I was talking to him, he's from Canada. He had to be sponsored to be here.
Yeah.
And fortunately for him, he had a good job being with Three Dog Night. But, the point is that it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're from another country, there were requirements. Now, that was in the 60s, I think, for Floyd. So, you're not talking, everybody, the media paints this picture that we're asking something so outrageous. These are normal things. This has been done for umpteen years.
Should I go back to common sense?
Yeah, exactly. and nobody's saying don't come. We're saying come legally and do it the right way. And I know that sometimes it's outrageous and the things that you're required to do become ridiculous. I get that. That happens in every agency, every organization. There comes a point where something becomes ridiculous. That needs to be called out. But when it comes to the standard things, now, I have my grandparents immigrated here separately. My grandfather came over before my grandmother, but I know that they didn't just walk in the door. They had to go through whatever they had to go through to get here. Unfortunately, I was never privy to what those things were. Yeah. But they did those things, and my grandmother didn't speak the language. They spoke Low German, so she had to adapt, right? And my mom, after my grandpa got crushed in his job, and my grandmother at that point wasn't working, right? She had 5 kids, I think, And my mom said they had to go on aid. They had to get aid. She said they had to write down every single thing in a month that they spent to compensate to how they spent the money that they were given. So again, this is not being prejudiced against any groups. This is the way that the government used to do things. And again, my mom was a teenager at the time. She had to help my grandma to know how to do all that stuff. So, when you know that, it's so hard to accept the media narrative now, because that hasn't changed. It shouldn't have changed, and if it has changed, that's dumb on our part. Yeah, that's dumb on our part.
You had mentioned April's book, and I read that, and it's a story about her father-in-law, who was a Jew in Germany during the war and the trials.
He was actually in Poland.
Pardon?
He was in Poland.
In Poland?
Yes.
Yeah. And all the trials and tribulations that he went through. I mean, having to work with no shoes in freezing weather to me would kill me. But she went in great detail because she interviewed him. Well, now he's in this country, and I had the opportunity to meet him. And it was kind of a contradiction in terms, because I thought I was looking at a Superman because of what he went through.
Yeah.
But he was an ordinary person.
Yep.
And if you analyze that, he's an ordinary person, and the Jews treated him like, well, so what if he dies? As a matter of fact, a lot of people around him. Yes.
Yeah.
They could, and there's certain things that you have a difficult time getting your arms around. And when I saw him, I thought, oh, God bless him. He made it through all of that. He has to be a Superman. You know what? Very good book. If you want a good read to find, especially if you like World War II stories.
Continues to sell. And that book's been out for 11 years now.
Really?
Yeah.
That's good.
And it just keeps selling. So God bless him, and God bless April for taking the time to write it for him. I think that's awesome. And speaking of publishing, since you've gone there, let's talk about there's no shortcut to publishing a book. How about that?
Publishing a
book.
Yes.
There's no shortcut. Books take a long time. This is by Defector. Kelsey McKinney wrote this in end of 2024, December. Books take a long time. Writing, editing, and publishing one is slow. It's slow, laborious work. A book that's sold today probably won't come out until 2027. They're talking about big publishers, the big five. They're not talking about if you're self-publishing a book, because you can do it as quickly or as slowly as you want. Though most books do take quite a long time to do when you think about when that person actually started writing that book and committing to that. So it makes sense that money-grubbing innovator boys have taken aim at book publishing, which is an industry full of words, and decided that the way to disrupt it is by using AI. So this person says the dweebiest of this operations is a company called Spines, whose marketing materials feature 4 men wearing high V-neck branded T-shirts, looking like they're about to ask you if you're ready for a massage. Spines is planning to disrupt the book industry by publishing, and their words, say it with me, 8,000 books in 2025 using artificial intelligence. So their goal, they say, is to shrink the distance between a book being written and being published by using AI to automate proofreading, cover design, metadata optimization, and limited translation services. So, it's always about the money.
Yes.
Yes, because imagine this. For $5,000, Spines claims it can have a manuscript published in 3 weeks. Multiply 8,000 times 5,000. You get quite a little bit of money, don't you? Yeah. So they've secured $16 million in Series A funding, and they're saying they want to publish up to 8,000. So, and the goal is to help 1 million authors publish their books. Well, anybody can publish a book. You can't get everybody to read your book. So what is your goal? If your goal is to publish, I'm going to tell you right now, I can help you publish for less than $5,000 by far. If you don't care what kind of book it is, you can do it yourself and you can throw it out there and have a book. I mean, so, this is nonsense in my eyes, right? Why would you want 8,000 books out there? Just to say you could do it? Because you got Series A funding for $16 million and you got to follow up, right? I mean, doesn't that seem reasonable? So what they want to do is create a faster pipeline from draft to bound book. If anybody has published a book, you know what this takes. Doug, you've done it. So Doug is the author of Heroes and Giants, and it's a very good book, and it's actually the second edition of his book.
Yes. Yeah.
We actually edited it. He published it with another company that kind of did some funny stuff. And
illegal, I might add.
And illegal. And then he brought it to us, and we took it and revised it, and it's the same book, and yet it's not.
Yeah.
Okay, so
there's new stuff added to it.
There's new stuff, and it's
it made
the
it more
flow.
readable.
Yeah, it's the flow.
Yeah. So I every now and then I go on the internet to see what fire department books are out there. And I have, over the years, I've read several other authors about fire department. None of them are as good as mine. Oh, wait a minute.
There's an author for you.
Matter of fact, one of them was just downright terrible, So, hey.
Yeah.
It's, this, again, and we've talked about this many times on this program, one of the things that I think is probably, outside of the stories, of course, that has to be good.
Yes.
But your book cover, when it's sitting up there on the shelf, it has to, when somebody walks by, it has to reach out and grab somebody.
Or when it's online and you're looking at it.
Absolutely.
Right?
It has
that's
to
a real
grab
important
somebody.
thing. Yeah. Yeah, you can judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
So this guy is saying
Janice,
this.
with that being said, look at some of the book covers out there. You go, how on earth would they ever decide that?
I know. It's funny. So it's not to say that publishing could not move faster. It should, but the delays in the publishing system are not because humans are slow and humans make mistakes. It's because the people who are in charge of these are corporations and have reduced the size of their workforce, so that now their employees are doing the jobs of multiple people. Well, they're just suffering the trials of being a small publisher like us, because that is part of the issue, is that, you only have so much time and you do your best to, do everything in succession and properly. But sometimes it's that the author has to get it back. They have to do some review. So there's delays there. Time is just, it is what it is. So, but that's the story. This goes on and on and on. If you want to read it, it's called, it's in Defector by Kelsey McKinney. There's no shortcut to publishing a book. And I think it's a very well-written article, and outlines for you a lot of the factors of what's going on out there.
I have a follow-up to what you're talking about. Knowing people, or thinking knowing people, before I signed with anybody as far as a publisher and an editor, I did my due diligence.
Right.
I came up with Tate Publishing. It was handed down from father to son. So I contacted them and found out this and that, and they were located in Oklahoma. And I told Debbie, let's fly back to Oklahoma, see this, because I expected, a storefront and a guy with a desk and an ashtray and smoking a cigar. That was it. Wasn't the case. Over 200 employees went in there, talked to a bunch of people. Seemed like a very, top drawer business. So I gave them my business. Well, over the next 6 months, when people would buy books, the two owners would keep the money.
Yeah.
embezzling, pure and simple. And finally, and what the district attorney back there didn't want to file a suit against him, but finally what Tate did, he said, I'll tell you what, well, if you send us $20 or $200 or whatever it was, we will send you all of your information on your book. Well, the district attorney says that is absolutely illegal. You have to give it to them. So they filed a suit against them.
Right.
And I think they should have gone to prison.
Yeah, they didn't. They didn't. No, and unfortunately, they were Christian publishers as well. Yeah, that made it even worse. And I was familiar with them. I was very excited when I found that company. I thought, oh my goodness, look at this. We need to strive to be like them. And I did. I did a lot of research on Tate. And so they put up a great front. So
they did.
What I'm going to say is that one of the last things that this person says is these people don't care about creative work. They like the fact that, as somebody pointed out in September, with generative AI tools like ChatGPT and Midjourney offer are shortcuts to the finish line. The rewards of being an artist without requiring any of the discipline it takes to make your art better. The aim of AI is profit at all costs. They do not care if the product is bad, because if a bad product is the only product that exists, consumers have no choice. So 8,000 books in a year, I don't know, seems like too much to me. But, the money's going to be there for them. They got the funding, and so I'm sure that they feel compelled to do what they're going to do. So just be careful when you're out there if you're an author. Choose what's important to you, and if all you want is to get the book out there, there's plenty of companies out there that can help you do that without spending $5,000.
The old adage is you step up to the line and you take your chances.
There you go. There you go. That's what it is. Hey, do you have a book today for the Book Blitz? All right. How about we do that?
I'm glad you said that, because I didn't want this to carry over, because it's from last week I had it, and it carried over to this week.
Oh.
And I really feel remiss that we have not spoken about this. And let me read the title, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. The title of the book is Our Endangered Values: America's Moral Crisis, by Jimmy Carter.
Oh, interesting. Very
now,
interesting.
he was 100 years old, and he passed away. And his philosophy for government is 180 degrees out from what mine is. And yet I found him to be a very, very moral man, and he was doing what he thought needed to be done. But unfortunately, the country didn't. And when I read this not too long ago, that it's the Electoral College that elects us. And, Trump, you say it was a landslide and this and that. Biden only had 3 electoral points, so it was a landslide. The people really, really rejected him. But let me read just this. President Jimmy Carter offered a passionate defense of separation of church and state, warning that fundamentals are deliberately barring the line between politics and religion. Sustained by his lifelong faith, Jimmy Carter assesses those issues in a balanced and courageous way. And I'm going to leave it at that, because I know we're getting close here.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
Okay.
I put it up on the screen, too. It was published in September of 2006.
Yes, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
And the flags in this country are still at half staff, so we're still in mourning for him passing away. And I'm sure he was, he should have stayed a peanut farmer. I'm sure he was a good one.
You're not showing your bias, are you?
But I thought we really should, because, because of his death. It's, Well, and so it's funny, you picked a president, and I've held this one for like weeks now because I didn't have an opportunity to talk about it. It's called The Enemy Within. Yeah.
Donald Trump, President Trump, talks about the enemy within all the time. This is a book written by Robert F. Kennedy.
Oh, really?
Yes. And you're going to say, well, it's an old book. Yes, it is. But some of the reviewers recent said, this is a really good story about history. And it says, the back of the book reads, will make you crackle with indignation. It turns over the rock, lets us see the snakes we must destroy, and recommends the instruments with which to do it. So they did a it's a nonfiction book. It's not fiction, and they did an investigation, and they found a lot of corruption. And they talk about it. So, yeah, it's past. Yeah, it's already done and over. And you can read all the reports, and the reports are all on file. But guess what, folks? The enemy within is not new. And so everybody's freaking out about Donald Trump talking about the enemy within. Well, guess what? So did Robert F. Kennedy. So just make note. Right?
Okay, Ed, do you have a book?
Oh, wait. Ed's not here. Where'd he go?
No.
Oh, we miss you, Ed. We miss you if you're listening. Again, we hope your mom's doing great. And we'll see you hopefully next week or the week after that, whenever you're available next.
And we do want you to come back and live here, too. So
We
have
do.
you in person.
Yeah, we miss seeing your smiling face.
Yes.
So hopefully you'll be able to do that soon, and that
Yeah.
your mom's truly on the mend. So, so check out those books, the one by Jimmy Carter. And, you said the flags are still at half-mast, but didn't they fly them?
For 30 days.
No, didn't they fly them yesterday at full mast in Washington?
Well,
When
that was by
Trump
order
was-
of Trump,
yes,
though.
when Trump
So,
was
yeah.
inaugurated, yeah. And he also signed an executive order to that effect.
Did he really?
He did, yeah. So I think that's interesting. I'm not sure how I feel about that one. I would
Well,
have
I'm
to
not.
say
I don't care where the flags
Yeah,
are, as
I
long
know.
as they're flying.
yeah. I think I don't care about that so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand the being honor to President Carter, but I think that he wouldn't mind for a day if you threw it up and let President Trump have his day, and then put him back down at half-mast again.
That's
I think
right,
That's
yeah.
fine. I don't know. It's a hard one, right?
I
You're going to
think
be on both sides of that one.
30 days is
That's
a little
kinda long.
much.
It's
yeah.
kinda long, yeah.
Well,
But it's okay.
let me give you an example.
Only a minute.
The fires that are burning now are burning in San Diego County. They still are not out in Pasadena, Altadena, and Malibu.
And it's been
And
a
yet
while.
we're in the 9th day of it. It's fallen from the front page, really. People don't care about it. So how are we going to care about flags at half staff for 30?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but that's where we are. All right, folks. Well, you are listening to What's the Story? I'm Janice Hermson, and he is Doug Ashby, and we will be back again next week. We'll have more for you. I have no idea where we're going to go with it, but
It'll be fun.
It'll be fun, and hopefully we'll keep you entertained and hopefully a little bit educated, more so than when you started. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.